Let's say that you're a PM at Facebook and Facebook has a lot of messaging apps, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, Instagram chats, for example. Should Facebook consolidate these? Hey everyone, welcome back to another Exponent product management mock interview. My name's Kevin, and on today's show, we have Ethan, and we're going to be doing a product strategy type mock interview today. Before we jump into the question, Ethan, do you mind telling the audience a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I'm a product manager at Google working on YouTube's ads platform. And before that, I worked at a startup called Parent, which was an ed tech company.
Great. Thanks for coming on today's show. So today I'm going to ask you this question. Let's say that you're a PM at Facebook and Facebook has a lot of messaging apps, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, Instagram chats, for example. Should Facebook consolidate these?
Great. Mind if I just share my screen here as I work through some notes? Okay. So I'm a PM at Facebook, which is many messaging apps, Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp. Should we consolidate? Okay, so I just have a couple of clarifying questions for you. Just to be clear, we're talking about retroactively consolidating these, right? Not as we're making the acquisition. So these products are already running. It's kind of today.
Right. So let's assume that this is today and these are existing apps.
Okay. And then the second question is there any specific driver behind this? Have our users been requesting this? Has there been any kind of speculation about new revenue opportunity or something along that, or is it just something that someone has thrown out as, hey, this is an idea for us?
Let's say that Mark Zuckerberg comes up to you and says that this is something that he's thought of, but then he goes on a 2-week vacation. He's going to come back in 2 weeks and he wants to know what you think. So feel free to talk about any sort of data you might look at.
Okay, great. So I think just to kind of give you very brief thoughts at the high level, I think it's good to think about, does this move make sense from Facebook's mission's perspective? And so Facebook's mission is to give people the power to build community and also to bring the world closer together. And I think on its face, this does kind of help advance that mission, and that it makes it easier for people to collaborate and communicate. It makes things more seamless, obviously if done well. And I do have some concerns though. I think that the things that jump to mind are there are some UX considerations, there's some privacy considerations across, from combining data in different apps. And then I'm not quite sure what this is going to do revenue. So I think the way that I'd like to approach this is actually by examining those factors. So can I just take a second here to maybe brainstorm some other factors as well and come up with a framework?
Yeah, feel free to take some time.
Okay, so here are the factors that I've come up with that I'd like to kind of think about this through. So we have our users. Basically, does this help our users accomplish what they're trying to accomplish? And then a little bit about the framework. So one side is consolidate, one side is separate, and we'll work through the pros and cons on each side for each of these factors, and then we can kind of come up with a recommendation.
So right now, is it just in an order that you brainstormed it in, or is this like in an order of weightedness?
Good question. Right now, it's just kind of top of mind. I think at the end, before coming up with a recommendation, it might make sense to think about should we weight these in a particular way, and I think the degree to which each factor is positive or negative on each side may impact that. If there are terrible privacy concerns, for instance, with consolidating, that may outweigh even a huge revenue opportunity, even if that depending, no matter what the weightings initially were.
Sounds good.
So yeah, this is in random order. Okay, so the factors are users essentially, will this benefit our users in terms of them accomplishing what they're trying to accomplish? I think consolidating, one thing that's beneficial here is it will help users kind of have like a more organized stream of conversation. So organization increase. Basically, if I'm talking to you, Kevin, in different apps, now it's all together. And so all my conversations are together. There is a downside to that though, of difficult to have multiple streams. So for instance, some content on Instagram, let's say maybe very ephemeral, like disappearing messages or something like that. And content on WhatsApp maybe a little bit more evergreen. And this would kind of blur those lines. I will say though, I think there probably are UX solutions to mitigate this issue. So if we decide to go down this path, we can talk about that stuff more. Another benefit here is that it's also easier for users to manage, in that there are fewer apps to deal with. So I don't have to remember, did I have this conversation on Instagram or did I have this conversation on WhatsApp? In terms of keeping things separate, I think one benefit is different apps are used for different purposes. So I think that's something that, similar to the difficult to maintain multiple work streams, it's kind of the other side of that. And again, there probably is a UX approach to solving this if we were to go with consolidating. I would say like this is our current experience, and I wouldn't say it's bad for users. So I don't know that I really have a big negative here. The only small one though is what I was mentioning before of you have to remember where you had a conversation going. So if you and I are talking on WhatsApp and we're talking on Instagram and we're talking on Facebook, and I said something to you or I sent you something and I have to search for it, it could be really, really hard to find something. I mean, particularly if I'm trying to search for something. Tough to remember where conversation is happening. So I would say, all in all, there probably is an edge here to consolidating, just based on the fact that there is probably a UX solution to any of the issues that we have towards users accomplishing their mission here. I'll add one other one that I actually think may be pretty significant, which is it could take users out of the context of their app. So if I'm on Instagram and I'm going through the feed, and now I go over to the Messenger and it opens a new app, that's pretty disorienting. Again, I think there's probably a solution to this, because it is probably possible to maintain some of the data in the separate apps, even if we also have a combined messaging app. But I definitely see a concern there.
So when you're saying that it's difficult to maintain multiple streams of conversations, is this something that you're just, I guess, pulling from personal experience or hearing from friends? Is there any data that you would look at to see if this is actually a problem?
That's a great question. I think there is pretty good data that you could pull. So what I would be looking for is, are users communicating with each other directly? So as in Ethan and Kevin, not Ethan and Kevin in a group. Are they communicating with each other at the same time in multiple apps? So we could look at the logs of, is this conversation happening in WhatsApp at the same time as it's happening in Instagram chats? Anecdotally, I've definitely experienced that where I don't use WhatsApp that heavily, but I'll be texting with someone and also, they send me an Instagram DM and it has a video attached and we're kind of going into tangents. So I suspect it will be validated, but there definitely is data that we could use to to figure that out for sure.
For sure. Yeah, let's move on to revenue.
Sure. Okay, so for revenue, again, I'll start with consolidated. I think it creates a little bit of a kind of like what I'll call cross-pollination. So, for example, WhatsApp's not really monetized very well right now, at least to my knowledge. It's a free app. I think that in some places it may require a subscription, but I'm not 100% sure about that. Either way, we don't serve ads on WhatsApp. And so this creates an opportunity for Facebook to take advantage of all the usage that WhatsApp has and push people potentially to its better monetized platforms. I think that there's kind of a negative side to that, though, also of it's going to basically drive users away from heavily monetized apps. So, I mean, we were talking about this earlier a little bit. If I'm on Instagram scrolling and now I go over to the messaging platform, if I'm switching apps, I may not find my way back to Instagram and the monetized feed. I thought I had another idea here on revenue, but I can't remember it. So I'll switch over to separating. So one benefit of keeping this separate is, I guess, kind of we know it works. So we know it's revenue neutral today. This, I mean, it's not necessarily a positive. It's just a non-negative, but we know it's done pretty well. One negative for, or I'm sorry, one positive for revenue though is there are more monetizable surfaces. So what I mean by this is if we were to go ahead and monetize the chat surface, we have multiple chat surfaces that we can monetize. And so obviously if they're consolidated, then you only have the one surface. And if you try to monetize it and let's say you fail or you drive usage down because of ad load or perceived ad load, how much people think that they're getting overwhelmed by ads, it may drive people away from the platform. It creates a lot more risk. But also if you have, let's say you have 1 billion users on Instagram, and pulling kind of random numbers here, 1 billion users on WhatsApp and 1 billion users on Facebook, there's obviously a significant overlap. Some of those users are the same, but you could monetize each of those users on each chat platform. So again, reduces the monetizable surfaces, or it increases the monetizable surfaces. I think, and to your question earlier about data, there probably is a way to test some of this. For instance, we probably could get a sense of if monetizing the feed is even an option, which is probably something that I imagine there's been. Sorry, not monetizing the feed, monetizing the chat feed is an option. I imagine there's existing research at Facebook and Instagram around that, and there's been a conscious decision not to. And so I would kind of ask of our strategic teams, is there a plan to do this in the future? Is this something we're considering, or are we not worried about the, whether or not this can be monetized? I think the answer to that is going to determine if it's an edge to separate or consolidate. So I'm going to call this a wash because I'm really not sure.
Okay. Yeah. Let's say that in the past, there have been experiments where we've inserted ads between like the third and fourth chat person in your first view of the chat, but we withdrew that from our production. So yeah, let's say that I mean, these are good considerations, but I think we can move on to privacy next.
Okay. Well, if that's the case and we don't plan to do that, then I will say a slight edge to consolidate if we don't plan to monetize the chat. For privacy, this is one of the areas that I'm most concerned on with the idea of combining them. So the first thing is users connected. So I'm not quite sure how to write this down, but basically, if I am connected with you on Instagram, that doesn't mean I should be connected with you on WhatsApp. And I think there's a major privacy concern here around connecting people on platforms that they didn't intend to be connected on, and potentially seeing profiles. I know a lot of people use WhatsApp for business purposes, and they may not want that connected to their personal Instagram, for instance. There probably is a way to do this through UX to keep this safe, but that would be a big concern for me. Another concern I have here is I guess it's more of a security concern than a privacy concern, but when you put all of the chat data in a single place, to me that raises the risk of a larger security breach. And so what I mean by that is if all of my conversations across all of my platforms are on a single messaging platform, then potentially a breach through Facebook, Instagram, or WhatsApp could cause that data to be compromised. And so that's a reduced risk or an increased risk. There's probably an alternative argument here that if you have fewer chat apps, that can kind of increase security. But my suspicion here is that it means more APIs going into your chat app, which means more surface area, which means more potential for breach. And then if we keep them separate, so this is kind of the flip side of being connected across different apps. There's a clear differentiation. If I'm connected with you on Instagram, it doesn't mean I'm connected to you on Facebook. And I think this is a good thing. And Instagram should strive to keep that, or Facebook should strive to keep that. So I'm trying to hurry up here a little because I'm going slow, but I think I would say there's an edge here towards separate because it creates clear delineation and it allows the apps to manage privacy independently in the ways that they see as most appropriate for their use case.
Sounds good.
Okay. So from the UX perspective, so I think that there's an opportunity here that if we combine the apps, it could pretty significantly increase clutter. I kind of mentioned it up earlier, where you could have multiple streams of conversation in the same place. You could have a mix of ephemeral content and evergreen content. Particularly with stuff like disappearing messages from Instagram, and people, like I mentioned, using WhatsApp for business purposes, or even having financial transactions over Facebook or WhatsApp through their pay features. So I think there's a concern there. So I would say it's just to keep track of those. I think there is a UX benefit here of it creates opportunities for us to algorithmically streamline the conversation. So if I'm having the same conversation in one app as another, maybe there's a way for us to create something that identifies similar conversations and helps people stay organized. So I don't know exactly what that is, but it could create opportunities for conversational organization through new tech. Yeah, and then I think the UX benefits of keeping these separate is people are used to this. That's pretty self-explanatory, and also the apps serve different purposes. So, the messaging needs for Instagram, for instance, are fundamentally different than on WhatsApp, where Instagram, I'm sharing a picture with you, and I want to be able to like that picture and interact with that picture right in the feed, in the messaging stream. Whereas WhatsApp, that's not necessarily the case. I guess it creates an opportunity for richer conversation, but I think there's real concerns there around, if you take a Facebook post and you put it next to an Instagram post, there's different UI, there's different features, there's different things to consider. And so I think that there's like a real, not only different purpose, but also different branding across them. That could be an issue. I guess that's kind of a new one. And then engineering effort, I think this one is pretty obvious.
For UX, which way are you swaying?
I'm actually swinging very heavily towards keeping it separate.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So this one's the easiest. No effort to keep it separate. I see a lot of effort here. Just to list off a few things that probably would need to happen. You need to migrate existing data. You probably need to build out a bunch of APIs to cross communicate. You need to deal with like total UI front end changes and everything, right? So there's a strong benefit here to keep separate.
For this, that sounds good. For the last one, regulatory, for the sake of time, just tell me the number one most pressing issue and which way you would sway.
I think there's public sentiment around antitrust. That's the biggest issue. And I would say that's a reason to keep things separate, because if you consolidate them, it makes clear that Facebook owns this much of a user's kind of like on digital experience. And I think that will increase the public sentiment around all of these things are connected, and it will raise antitrust concerns for the general population. So my recommendation here, I think, is to keep it separate based on this. Probably would make sense for us to, if we have more time, weigh these factors and see if that changes. But just kind of looking at how things worked out, I really see a lot of benefits in keeping things separate.
Cool. So I think that this was a really nice framework that you used. Let's say that Mark Zuckerberg is back from his 2 weeks and he wants to see what your summary is. So, you assume that you put a little bit more rigor into this in the 2 weeks of work. How would you summarize your recommendation to Mark?
My recommendation to Mark would be that we've looked at kind of the pros and cons of keeping things the way they are, separate versus consolidating them. And although there are benefits to users in terms of allowing us to create more organization around our conversations, having fewer apps to manage, and potentially being able to navigate between apps more seamlessly, there are so many concerns and such an uphill battle for us to add messaging in. And it's unclear what the impact will be in terms of revenue, that we think that it is wise for us to wait to pursue this. I would say it also makes sense for us to do a little bit more research around, is there a compelling use case towards doing this? And is there a way to help achieve some of the goals that we had? And I would assume, one of the goals or one of the positives of combining them is that cross-pollination. So is there a way for us to increase that cross-pollination without necessarily putting everyone on the same messaging app?
Got it. Cool. I really liked how you wrap things up there. So I think this is a good place for us to stop the mock interview. Thanks again, Ethan, for your framework here. I really like the way you presented your answer here. I have some feedback here that I wrote down. I'll share them with you, and I'd love to hear for you to share any feedback you might have about yourself or any tips for the audience as well. So the first thing that I wrote down was that I really liked how you did a screen share there. I think that that is a really good way, especially since we're switching back and forth between all these different factors and keeping them separate or combining the apps. I think it's a good way to help me as an interviewer see how your thought process is and to help with organization there. I think at one point you forgot something that you wanted to say. So I guess my recommendation here is, for each of these factors, don't feel like you have to just jump right in. Maybe you can take a few 30 seconds and just brainstorm and write shorthand what you're going to mention for each one. That might be one way you can, I guess, prevent losing any information that way. And I think your factors here were good, they were rigorous, but I think that for you always want to be cognizant that in an interview, you probably only have 20 to 30 minutes, and then you want to leave some time for Q&A or any back and forths with the interviewer. So maybe cutting down or combining some of the factors. I noticed that some of the points that you made were kind of repeating. So I think you could have combined some of the factors there. And like we kind of rushed through the last one. Maybe you wanted to say something about GDPR, but that's something that we couldn't touch on just because of the time constraints. So all in all, I think this was a really good interview. I really liked how at the end, when I asked you to communicate this to Mark, what would you do? And you demonstrated that you're able to synthesize all your information. And I really like the way you presented it. You said that although there's XYZ benefits, you would actually go with the recommendation of keeping them separate because of the reasons that you stated. So really good way to show that you put some thought into both the benefits and the cons of keeping them separate or combining them. So all in all, great mock interview. I'd love for you to have some time to give any feedback for yourself too.
Yeah, thank you. It was a fun interview. So I agree. It was a little bit repetitive, and I kind of realized it as I was talking about the UX piece, that it was very similar to the users piece. And so it definitely could have been combined there. And I think generally, I have a tendency to be long-winded in my answers and to sort of talk stream of consciousness, which I think isn't necessarily always good in an interview, and makes sense to pause. I also I wish that I had been forthcoming about, here's the data that I would need to validate this, this anecdotal experience that I had. You kind of had to draw that out of me and ask, is there any data that you could look at? And I think in an interview, it's always beneficial to say, here's my hypothesis, is that this will be positive or that this will have this impact, but this is the data that I would be looking for to validate or invalidate that. And yeah, and on positive things, I did like the way that I set it up and the fact that I had a very clear way to think about it. And I liked that the answer to me became very clear of separate it. It just clearly, outweighed consolidating it based on the factors I considered at least. But I do wish I had dug a little bit more into what were Mark Zuckerberg's possible motivations for suggesting it, and using that to figure out if I had the right factors and also the right weights. I think he wasn't necessarily thinking of it from a revenue perspective. He might have been thinking of it from some other initiative that we're working on or something along those lines. So would have been good to probably even ask more about that and even potentially hypothesize on it before providing a recommendation.
Totally, yeah. If there was some, I guess, root cause as to where this recommendation came from, perhaps you could have explored other possibilities besides consolidating messenger apps. But all in all, great mock interview. Thanks for your time, Ethan. And for the audience watching this video, good luck with your upcoming PM interview.
Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons below to let us know that this video was valuable for you. And of course, check out hundreds more videos just like this at tryexponent.com. Thanks for watching and good luck on your upcoming interview.